The Cathari Dominion had sent its final plea across the galaxy. Ambassador Vextal stood on the observation deck of the Resolute Hope, watching the swarms advance through the Cathar system. The hive mind's vessels blotted out the distant star, their organic hulls pulsing with the rhythm of a single, predatory consciousness. 3 Dominion worlds had already fallen. The fourth, Cathar Prime, held the last of their species' genetic archives, their cultural memory, their future. The transmission repeated on every known frequency. 12 languages, 7 species, 1 message. This is the Cathari Dominion. We request immediate military assistance. Our defensive capabilities are exhausted. The swarm will consume all biological matter in this sector. Please, anyone, respond. Vextal's mandibles clicked with anxiety, a sound he had trained himself to suppress over 200 cycles of diplomatic service. Now, he let it echo through his thoracic chamber. There was no one left to impress. Ambassador, his aide, Technician Lorsa, approached with a data slate. We've received a response from an unregistered quadrant. The signal originated from a system designated Sol. Vextal turned from the viewport. Sol, that's outside mapped Dominion space. Who are they? Lorsa's antennae flattened against her skull. They identified themselves as Terrans, humans. They requested our exact coordinates and current swarm fleet composition. Then they terminated transmission. That's it. That's it, Ambassador. 72 hours. They said they would arrive in 72 hours. Vextal processed the information. 72 of their standard cycles. The swarm would reach Cathar Prime in 48. The math was catastrophic. He reached for the comm panel, intending to demand clarification, but the human channel remained silent. Keep broadcasting, he ordered. Send them everything. Tactical data, swarm biological profiles, everything. Lorsa hesitated. Ambassador, we know nothing about these creatures, their technology, their intentions. We've never encountered humans before. Nor have they encountered the swarm, Vextal replied. What choice do we have? He watched the swarms advance on the holographic display. 1 billion individual organisms, directed by a single intelligence, moving with the precision of a blade. The Dominion's remaining defense fleet numbered 300 ships. Against that, they were nothing. 72 cycles. It was a lifetime, it was an eternity, it was far too short. Vextal had spent his entire career navigating the complex web of Dominion politics, brokering peace between species that had warred for millennia. He had seen the worst of what intelligent life could do to itself. But the swarm was different. The swarm didn't hate. It didn't negotiate. It didn't even communicate. It consumed. The hours crawled past. Vextal slept in shifts, waking to the same grim reports, defensive lines collapsing, refugee ships unable to escape, the swarm's advance accelerating beyond all projections. The humans had given no further updates, no confirmation of their arrival, nothing. At hour 46, the swarm entered Cathar Prime's outer orbit. Vextal stood on the bridge of the Resolute Hope, watching the tactical display turn red. Dominion ships were dying by the dozen. The swarm's boarding organisms were breaching hulls, their acid-based biology melting through alloy like tissue paper. The screams of dying crew filtered through the comm channels. Ambassador, we have to evacuate, Lorsa urged. The swarm will reach the planet within the hour. The genetic archives are already gone, Vextal said quietly. I ordered their digital transfer to the Resolute Hope 40 cycles ago. The physical archives are irrelevant. Our survival is all that matters. He looked at the display. 48 hours. The humans had promised 72. He had gambled everything on an unknown species from an unknown system, and he had lost. Then the scanners shifted. Ambassador, Lorsa's voice cracked with disbelief. I'm reading. Thousands of signatures emerging from the warp corridor there. They're arriving. Vextel's gaze snapped to the main viewport. The star field was being replaced by something else. Ships, thousands of them. They emerged from the warp corridor in perfect formation, their hulls angular and utilitarian, lacking the flowing elegance of Dominion design. They were warships, every single one of them. There were no diplomatic vessels, no support ships, no transports. Only weaponry. The human fleet positioned itself between the Dominion survivors and the swarm. Vextel's comm panel lit up with a new transmission. He opened the channel. Cathari vessels, this is Commander Elias Vance of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We've analyzed your tactical data. Maintain your current position and do not engage. We will handle the swarm. Vextel stared at the display. The human fleet was enormous, larger than the entire Dominion Defense Force before the war. But the swarm's numbers were still superior. Even with these reinforcements, the math was brutal. Commander Vance, I don't think you understand the scale of. I understand perfectly, Vance interrupted, his voice flat and emotionless. We've seen this before. Stay behind our lines. Do not engage. We'll handle it. The transmission ended. Vextel watched as the human fleet advanced. Their ships were strange, blocky, asymmetrical, covered in weapons emplacements that Dominion sensors couldn't identify. They moved with an aggression that bordered on recklessness, accelerating directly toward the swarm's primary formation. Ambassador, look, Lorsa pointed at the display. They're not holding formation. They're splitting into attack patterns. Vextel saw it. The human fleet was dividing into hundreds of smaller units, each one targeting a different swarm vessel. They weren't defending a position. They were attacking. Get me Commander Vance again, Vextel ordered. I need to warn him. The swarm's adaptive biology. Ambassador, they're already in combat range, Lorsa reported. It's too late. Vextel watched the human ships close the distance. He expected to see a massacre. Instead, he saw something else entirely. The humans didn't fight like the Dominion. They didn't fight like any species Vextel had ever encountered. Their tactics were asymmetrical, vicious, and utterly without mercy. Human ships rammed swarm vessels at full speed, their reinforced hulls punching through organic armor like fists through flesh. Boarding parties teleported into the heart of swarm carriers, emerging minutes later as the carriers exploded from within. The swarm's adaptive biology was irrelevant. The humans weren't giving it time to adapt. Vextel watched a human cruiser collide with a swarm dreadnought, the resulting explosion consuming both vessels. There were no escape pods, no survivors. The humans were spending their ships like currency, each loss accepted as the cost of victory. This isn't a battle, Lorsa whispered. This is something else. Vextel couldn't disagree. He had seen courage. He had seen sacrifice. But this was different. The humans weren't fighting for territory or resources. They weren't fighting for survival. They were fighting with a cold, methodical precision that suggested centuries of practice. The swarm, for the first time in recorded history, began to retreat. Vextel watched the organic vessels attempt to disengage, their hive-mind intelligence finally recognizing the threat. But the humans didn't allow retreat. Their ships pursued the fleeing swarm vessels, hunting them down with relentless efficiency. Commander Vance, Vextel opened the channel. The swarm is retreating. You've done it. The swarm doesn't retreat, Vance cut him off. They regroup. They adapt. We'll finish this, but we need information. Your people have studied the swarm for centuries. We need everything. Vextel hesitated. Commander, your casualties must be. We don't count casualties, Vance said. We count victories. The transmission ended. Vextel stared at the display. The human fleet was already regrouping, their wounded ships being repaired by automated drones. There was no celebration, no relief. The humans moved with the efficiency of a machine. What have we done? Lorsa asked quietly. What have we brought to our system? Vextel had no answer. He watched the human fleet reform, their weapons still hot, their crews still ready for the next engagement. The humans hadn't come to save the Dominion. They had come for something else, something Vextel didn't yet understand. But he was beginning to suspect that the swarm hadn't been the greatest threat to his people's survival. The humans were. Commander Elias Vance stood on the bridge of the Sword of Terra, watching the tactical display update with the aftermath of the engagement. The swarm had retreated to the outer system, their damaged vessels regrouping beyond sensor range. They would return. They always returned. Vance had commanded this fleet for 6 years. He had fought the swarm in 3 different systems, under 3 different flags, for reasons that changed with every deployment. The swarm was a constant. The political reasons for fighting it were irrelevant. What mattered was the work. "Commander, the Cathari ambassador is requesting a meeting," Lieutenant Marisol reported from the comm station. "He's insistent." Vance looked at the display. The Cathari vessels had maintained their position, their crews undoubtedly processing what they had witnessed. They had expected to die. Instead, they had watched a species they'd never encountered systematically dismantle an enemy that had terrorized their civilization for millennia. They were afraid. They didn't understand what they had seen. "Patch him through," Vance ordered. Ambassador Vextel's image appeared on the main viewport. His mandibles were clicking again, a nervous habit that Vance had seen in a dozen different species. Fear was universal, so was ignorance. "Commander Vance," Vextel began, his vocal processor struggling to maintain composure. "I want to express our gratitude. Your intervention saved our world, our species. We are in your debt." Vance nodded. "You're welcome to express that gratitude during the formal diplomatic exchange, but that's not why you contacted me." Vextel's mandibles stopped clicking. "Commander, You want to know who we are, where we came from, why we have the capacity to defeat the swarm when your entire Dominion couldn't." Vance paused. "That's a longer conversation than we have time for right now. The swarm will regroup. They always do. I need your tactical data, your biological profiles, your history of the swarm's movements through your territory." "Commander, I can provide that information, but I have to ask, you said you've seen this before. When? Where? How is that possible? The swarm hasn't entered this quadrant of the galaxy in over 3,000 cycles." Vance turned away from the viewport. "The swarm isn't your problem, it's ours." "Ours?" Vextel's confusion was visible even through the distortion of the transmission. "What do you mean, ours?" 300 years ago the swarm attacked Earth," Vance said. "They nearly killed us all. We lost 2 billion people in the first month. Our species was on the edge of extinction, but we didn't die. We fought back. We adapted. We learned." He turned back to face the Cathari ambassador. "We've been hunting the swarm ever since. Every time they appear, we follow. Every time they attack, we destroy. They don't know how to deal with us because we don't fight the way they expect. We don't fight to defend. We fight to exterminate." Vextel's mandibles were clicking so rapidly that the sound was audible through the comm channel. "You've been hunting them for 3 centuries. "Longer," Vance said. "We've been tracking their movements through the galaxy for 400 years. They never stay in one place for long. They consume, then they move on. But we've been following them, pushing them back, destroying their hive mind whenever we find it." "Then why haven't you told anyone?" Vextel demanded. "The Dominion could have." "The Dominion couldn't have done anything," Vance cut him off. "Your technology is inferior. Your tactics are defensive. You've survived this long because the swarm found easier prey elsewhere. But we knew they'd come here eventually, so we waited. We prepared." Vextel was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was strained. "You used us. You knew the swarm would attack our worlds and you used us as bait." "No," Vance said. "We used the swarm, you were just in the way." The transmission went silent. Vextel's expression was difficult to read through the distortion, but Vance had seen that look before. Betrayal, outrage, fear. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Vextel said finally. "The swarm isn't just a threat, it's an ecosystem. It's been consuming species for millions of cycles. It will adapt to you. It always adapts." "We know," Vance said. "We're counting on it." "Counting on it?" Vextel's voice rose to a pitch that would have been painful to human ears. "You don't understand. The swarm's adaptability is infinite. It will find a way to defeat you. It always finds a way." Vance smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "We've been fighting this war for 4 centuries. We've lost more people than your entire dominion has ever contained. We've adapted too. We've become something that the swarm doesn't know how to fight." He gestured to the tactical display where the human fleet was still regrouping. "When we first encountered the swarm, we tried diplomacy. We tried containment. We tried all the things that civilized species are supposed to do. None of it worked. So we changed." "Changed how?" Vextel asked. Vance stepped closer to the viewport. "We learned to think like the swarm. We analyzed their biology. We reverse-engineered their communications. We studied their tactics for 2 centuries, cataloging every engagement, every defeat, every adaptation. And then we started winning." He paused. "The swarm is a hive mind. It thinks as one. That's its strength. But it's also its weakness. When the hive mind encounters something it doesn't understand, it can't adapt quickly enough. It needs time to process, to analyze, to change." "You've been exploiting a vulnerability," Vextel said, "for centuries." "Exploiting is a strong word," Vance said. "We prefer leveraging. But yes, we've been creating situations that force the swarm to think, to hesitate, and every time it hesitates, we strike." Vextel's mandibles had stopped clicking. "Then why haven't you destroyed them entirely? If you understand them so well, why is the swarm still a threat?" Vance's expression hardened. "Because destroying them entirely would require something we're not willing to do. Not yet, but that's a conversation for another day." He turned to his tactical officer. "Prepare for the next engagement. The swarm will be back within 24 hours. We need to be ready." "Commander," Vextel interrupted, "I need to ask you one more thing. Why did you come? If this is just about hunting the swarm, why involve us at all?" Vance looked at the Cathari ambassador. He saw the fear in his posture, the desperation in his voice. He had seen that look before, in the faces of species that had been saved only to realize that salvation came with a price. "Because we need allies," Vance said. "Not for the war, for the aftermath. The swarm won't stop. They never stop. But if we work together, we can push them back permanently. We can create a barrier that they can't cross." "That's why you came?" Vextel asked. "For an alliance?" "No," Vance said. "We came because the swarm was here. The alliance is just collateral." He terminated the transmission. Lieutenant Marisol looked up from her console, her expression troubled. "Commander, that was harsh." Vance shrugged. "They needed to understand. The swarm isn't their problem. It's ours. They just happen to be in the way." Marisol shook her head. "That's not what I meant. They're scared. They watched their entire defense fleet get destroyed. They thought they were going to die, and then we showed up. They want to believe we're heroes." "We're not heroes," Vance said. "We're survivors. There's a difference." He turned to the main viewport where the human fleet was continuing its reorganization. The swarm would return. They always returned. But this time the humans had a new asset, the Cathari. They didn't know it yet, but they were already part of something larger. "What happens after?" Marisol asked quietly. "After we push the swarm back, what happens to them?" Vance didn't answer. He watched the tactical display, his expression unreadable. "We'll cross that bridge when we get to it," he said finally. "Right now, we have a war to win." Marisol nodded and returned to her console, but Vance could feel her gaze on him, her questions unspoken. He was used to it. He had been carrying the weight of this war for longer than she had been alive. He had seen too much to care about anything but the mission. The swarm was the enemy. Everything else was just details. The swarm returned at the dawn of the second day. They emerged from the warp corridor in waves, their organic vessels pulsing with the rhythm of a single, predatory consciousness. Vextal watched from the bridge of the Resolute Hope as the human fleet moved to intercept, their formation shifting with the fluid precision of a blade. "Ambassador, the humans are moving to engage," Lorsa reported. They're not waiting, they're attacking." Vextal nodded. He had expected nothing less. Commander Vance didn't strike him as a patient tactician. "Get me a live feed from the engagement. I want to see what they're doing." The display shifted to show the human fleet's advance. They were using the same tactics as before, aggressive, asymmetrical, devastating. But this time, something was different. The swarm had learned. Their vessels were moving differently, their formations adjusted to counter the human assault. "They adapted," Vextal breathed. "The swarm adapted to human tactics in less than a day." Lorsa's antennae flattened against her skull. "Ambassador, I'm reading changes in the human fleet's movements. They're shifting formation." Vextal watched as the human ships reorganized, their battle lines opening to reveal something new. A group of ships at the center of the fleet began to move forward, their hulls covered in unfamiliar technology. They weren't armed, not in any conventional sense. "What are those?" Vextal asked. Lorsa's console beeped with alarms. "Ambassador, I'm detecting massive energy signatures from those vessels. They're projecting something, some kind of field." Vextal watched as the human ships activated their weapons. The field expanded outward, enveloping the swarm's forward vessels. The effect was immediate and terrible. The swarm's organic hulls began to break down, their biological structures dissolving as if exposed to some kind of acid. "They're using a biological weapon," Vextal realized. "They developed a weapon that targets the swarm's organic composition." "It's more than that, Ambassador," Lorsa said. "I'm reading changes in the swarm's communications. Their hive mind it's fragmenting. The humans are attacking their neural network." Vextal stared at the display. The swarm's vessels were drifting, their movements becoming erratic. The hive mind was losing control of its individual components. "Look," Lorsa pointed. "They're retreating. The swarm is retreating again." But the humans didn't allow retreat. Their ships pursued the fleeing swarm vessels, their weapons still active. The biological weapon continued to spread through the swarm's formations, dissolving their ships from the inside out. Vextal watched as the swarm's fleet was systematically destroyed. It was a slaughter. The humans weren't just winning. They were annihilating the swarm's presence in this sector. "Commander Vance," Vextal opened the channel. "You've done it. You've broken their attack." Vance's image appeared on the display. His expression was unchanged, as cold and professional as before. "The swarm's main force is still intact. They'll be back. We need to move to the next phase." "Next phase?" Vextal asked. "What next phase?" Vance paused. "We're going to eliminate the swarm's hive mind." Vextal's mandibles clicked with alarm. "Eliminate the hive mind? That's impossible. The swarm's hive mind is distributed across thousands of vessels. You can't." "We've identified the hive mind's core," Vance said. "It's located on their flagship. The swarm's central intelligence is contained within a single vessel. We destroy that vessel, we destroy the hive mind." "Commander, that's a suicide mission," Vextal said. "The swarm's flagship is protected by their entire fleet. You'll have to fight through every vessel they have to reach it." Vance nodded. "We know." "You're going to lose thousands of ships," Vextal said. "You're going to lose millions of your people." "We've lost millions before," Vance said. "We'll lose millions again. That's the cost of victory." The transmission ended. Vextel stared at the display, his mind racing. The humans were willing to sacrifice everything to destroy the swarm. They were willing to pay any price. "What are they?" Lorsa whispered. "What kind of species sacrifices itself like this?" Vextel didn't answer. He watched the human fleet reorganize, their ships moving into formation for the final assault. "They're the kind of species that refuses to die," he said finally. "The kind that's been fighting for so long that survival has become the only thing that matters." The human fleet advanced. The swarm responded, their vessels moving to intercept. But the humans were faster. Their ships hit the swarm's defensive lines with the force of a hammer, smashing through their formations with reckless abandon. "Ambassador, look," Lorsa pointed. "Those ships at the center, they're breaking through." Vextel watched as a group of human ships forced their way through the swarm's defenses. Their hulls were damaged, their systems failing, but they kept moving. "They're going to reach the flagship," Vextel breathed. "They're actually going to do it." The human ships reached the swarm's flagship. They fired their weapons, their blasts tearing through the flagship's organic hull. The hive mind's vessel began to break apart. "Ambassador, the swarm's fleet is going into disarray," Lorsa said. "The hive mind is collapsing." Vextel watched as the swarm's vessels began to drift, their movements becoming random. The hive mind was gone. "It's over," Vextel breathed. "It's actually over." But even as he spoke, something was happening. The swarm's surviving vessels were acting independently, their individual components no longer directed by a single intelligence. They were still dangerous. "Commander Vance," Vextel opened the channel. "The swarm's individual vessels are still active. They're not controlled by the hive mind anymore. They're acting on instinct." Vance's image appeared on the display. His expression was unchanged. "We know that's the next phase. We'll hunt them down individually." "You're going to spend years tracking them down," Vextel said. "Maybe decades." "I know," Vance said. "We've done it before. We'll do it again." He terminated the transmission. Vextel stared at the display, watching the human fleet reorganize. They had won. They had destroyed the swarm's hive mind. But the war was far from over. "What have we done?" Lorsa asked quietly. "What have we brought to our system?" Vextel didn't answer. He watched the human ships moving through the swarm's remnants, their weapons still active, their crews still ready. They had saved the Cathari, but at what cost? "Prepare a diplomatic delegation," Vextel ordered. "I need to meet with Commander Vance, face to face." "Ambassador, is that wise?" Lorsa asked. "They've just demonstrated their military capabilities. They could." "They could have destroyed us already," Vextel said. "They didn't. That means they want something. We need to know what it is." He turned to the display, where the human fleet was continuing its work. The swarm was broken, but Vextel had the feeling that the real threat was only beginning to reveal itself. "The humans aren't saviors," he said quietly. "They're hunters, and we've just invited them into our territory." Lorsa's antennae flattened against her skull. "Ambassador, what are you saying?" Vextel didn't answer. He watched the human ships moving through the system, their presence both a shield and a threat. The swarm was no longer the greatest danger to the Cathari Dominion. The humans were. The meeting took place aboard the Sword of Terra, Commander Vance's flagship. Vextel had expected something grand, a display of military power designed to intimidate. Instead, he found a utilitarian vessel, its corridors lined with functional panels and barely adequate lighting. There was no decoration, no art, no indication that this was anything other than a warship. Commander Vance met him in a small conference room, its walls covered in tactical displays and data feeds. There were no chairs, no table, just a holographic projector that could show whatever information the commander considered important. "Ambassador," Vance said, "welcome aboard the Sword of Terra." Vextel inclined his head. "Commander, I appreciate you agreeing to this meeting." Vance gestured to the holographic display. "Let's not waste time. You want to know why we're here. You want to know what we want." Vextal nodded. "Yes, your people saved us, but I need to understand why. You said the alliance was collateral, that we were just in the way. I need to understand what that means." Vance was silent for a moment. Then he activated the holographic display. Images appeared, recordings of human history, of wars and battles and devastation that Vextal could barely comprehend. 300 years ago, the swarm attacked Earth, Vance said. We were a young species, barely out of our own solar system. We had no idea what we were facing. The swarm's technology was beyond anything we had ever encountered. We thought we were going to die. He paused, letting the images speak for themselves. Vextal watched as human cities burned, as millions fled from the swarm's advance. "But we didn't die," Vance continued. "We adapted, we learned, we fought back, and we won. Not because we were stronger, not because we were smarter, because we refused to accept defeat." He gestured to the images. "You see these cities, these people, they're all gone now, every last one of them, but their sacrifice bought us time, time to learn, time to prepare." "You prepared for the swarm's return," Vextal said. "We prepared for everything," Vance said. "We knew the swarm would return. We knew they would find other species to consume. We knew we had to stop them, so we built a fleet. We developed weapons, we trained our people, and we waited." Vextal was silent for a long moment. "You've been preparing for this war for centuries. You've sacrificed everything, your people, your resources, your future, all to fight a war that started before any of you were born." Vance nodded. "The swarm killed 2 billion of our people. They destroyed everything we had built. We made a choice. We would never let that happen again. We would never let another species suffer the way we suffered." He looked at Vextal. "That's why we came. Not because we care about the Dominion. Not because we want your resources. Because the swarm is our enemy. They've always been our enemy, and we will never stop hunting them until they're gone." Vextal processed the information. The humans had been fighting this war for 300 years. They had sacrificed generations of their people to a conflict that had no end in sight. "Commander, I understand your commitment," Vextal said. "But I have to ask, what happens after the swarm is gone? What happens to us?" Vance was silent for a moment. "The Dominion will be free to rebuild. We'll share our technology. We'll help you restore your worlds. We'll leave your space and focus on the remaining swarm remnants." "That's all?" Vextal asked. "You'll just leave?" Vance shrugged. "We're not conquerors. We don't want your resources. We don't want your territory. We want the swarm gone. After that, we don't care what happens." Vextal wasn't sure he believed the commander. There was something in his voice, something that suggested there was more to the story than he was telling. "Commander, I need to be honest with you," Vextal said. "We're not prepared for this. The Dominion is a coalition of peaceful species. We don't have your military experience. We don't have your willingness to sacrifice. We've never fought a war like this." Vance nodded. "I know, that's why you need us." "Need you?" Vextal asked. "What do you mean?" Vance stepped closer. "The swarm is gone from this system, but they'll be back. They always come back, and when they do, you need to be ready." "You want to train us," Vextal said. "You want to turn us into soldiers." "I want to help you survive," Vance said. "That's all I've ever wanted." Vextal studied the commander's face. He saw exhaustion. He saw pain. He saw the weight of centuries of warfare pressing down on a man who had been born into a war he never asked to fight. "Commander, I'll be frank," Vextal said. "We've never fought a war like this. We don't have the military tradition. We don't have the willingness to sacrifice. We're a civilization of diplomats and scientists. We don't know how to fight." Vance smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "You'll learn, the swarm will teach you." "What if we don't want to learn?" Vextal asked. "What if we'd rather find another way?" There is no other way, Vance said. The swarm doesn't negotiate, it doesn't accept surrender. It consumes everything it encounters. You either fight or you die. Those are your only choices. Vextal was silent for a long moment. Commander, I don't know what to say. I came here expecting threats. I came here expecting ultimatums. I didn't expect this. Vance shrugged. We're not your enemy, we're not your savior, we're just something in between. He stepped back and activated the holographic display again. I'll have my people prepare a training program. Your military personnel can begin as soon as you're ready. Commander, wait, Vextal said. Before we move forward, I need to ask you one more thing. Why do you care? You said the alliance is collateral. You said we were just in the way. Why are you offering to help us? Vance was silent for a long moment. Then he said something that Vextal would never forget. Because I've seen too many species die, Vance said. I've watched civilizations burn, cultures vanish, billions of lives extinguished. And I know that if we don't help, the same thing will happen to you. I can't let that happen. Not again. Not while I can still do something about it. He looked at Vextal. So that's why I care. Not because I want to, because I have to, because I'm the only one who can. Vextal didn't know what to say. He had come expecting a monster. Instead, he found something far more complex. A man who had been fighting so long that he didn't know how to stop. Commander, I don't know what to think, Vextal said. You've done something incredible. You've destroyed the swarm's hive mind. You've saved our species, but I can't help wondering what happens next. What happens to us? Vance looked at him for a long moment. That's up to you, he said. You can rebuild. You can grow stronger. You can learn from our mistakes. Or you can go back to the way things were and wait for the swarm to return. He paused. I know which option I'd choose. The Cathari High Council convened 3 days after the battle. Vextal stood before them, his posture rigid with tension. The council chamber was filled with the representatives of 7 species, their expressions ranging from hope to suspicion. They had seen the battle. They knew what the humans had done, but they also knew what the humans had demanded. Ambassador Vextal, Councillor Murath began, we've reviewed your reports. The humans have demonstrated their military capabilities. They've destroyed the swarm's hive mind. They've saved our worlds, but they've also made demands. Vextal nodded. Counselor, the humans have offered us an alliance. They will help us rebuild. They will share their technology, but in exchange, they want unrestricted access to our space and resources. The council chamber erupted in protest. Unrestricted access. Councillor Dalrin's mandibles clicked with outrage. They want to move through our territory at will. They want to extract our resources. That's correct, Vextal said. The humans see the swarm as a galactic threat. They want to be able to move freely through our space to respond to any future outbreaks. Ambassador, this is unacceptable, Dalrin said. We've just survived one threat. We can't allow another to take its place. Counselor, I understand your concerns, Vextal said, but the humans have already proven their trustworthiness. They could have taken what they wanted by force. They didn't. They asked. You trust them, Councillor Murath asked, after everything you've seen. Vextal paused. I don't trust them, but I believe they're being honest about their intentions. The council chamber fell silent. Vextal could feel their gazes on him, evaluating him, judging him. Ambassador, Murath said, we've reviewed your report. We know the humans destroyed the swarm's hive mind. We know they saved our species, but we also know they're hiding something. Commander Vance admitted as much. Vextal nodded. He told me the humans have been fighting the swarm for 3 centuries. They've been tracking them through the galaxy, pushing them back, destroying their hive mind whenever they find it. They've sacrificed millions of their own people to this war. And they expect us to do the same, Dalrin asked. Not necessarily, Vextal said. The humans offered to train our military. They offered to share their technology. They offered to help us rebuild. They said they would leave after the swarm is gone." "You believe that?" Murath asked. "After everything you've seen?" Vextel was silent for a long moment. "I believe Commander Vance believes it," he said. "Whether he'll be able to follow through is another question." The council chamber was silent. Vextel could feel the weight of their decision pressing down on him. "Ambassador, we need to make a decision," Murath said. "Do we accept the humans' offer, or do we reject it and risk facing the swarm alone?" Vextel looked at the council. He saw their fear. He saw their hope. He saw their uncertainty. "Counselors," he said, "we've never faced a threat like the swarm. We've never fought a war like this. We don't have the military tradition. We don't have the willingness to sacrifice. We're a civilization of diplomats and scientists. We don't know how to fight." He paused, "But the humans do. They've been fighting for 3 centuries. They've learned things we don't understand. They've developed weapons we can't imagine. They know how to survive." "And you think we should accept their alliance?" Dalryn asked. Vextel nodded. "I think we don't have a choice. The swarm will return. They always return. If we accept the humans' offer, we'll have a chance to survive. If we reject it, we'll be alone." The council chamber erupted in debate. Vextel stepped back, letting them argue. He had done what he could. The rest was up to them. Hours passed. The debate continued. Vextel watched as the councilors struggled with their decision, weighing the risks and benefits. Finally, the vote was called. The councilors cast their votes one by one. 7 species, 7 votes. Vextel watched as the results came in. 4 votes in favor, 3 against. "Ambassador," Murath said, "the council has made its decision. We will accept the humans' offer of an alliance." Vextel nodded. "Thank you, counselors. I'll inform Commander Vance." He turned to leave, but Murath stopped him. "Ambassador, before you go, we have one more question. Do you think the humans will keep their promise? Do you think they'll leave after the swarm is gone?" Vextel paused. "I don't know," he said, "but I believe they'll try." He walked out of the council chamber, leaving the representatives to their debates. He had done what he could. The rest was up to the humans. Vextel found Commander Vance in the Sword of Terra's conference room. The commander was studying a holographic map of the sector, his expression unreadable. "Commander," Vextel said, "the High Council has accepted your offer. We'll agree to an alliance." Vance nodded. "Good, we have work to do." He activated the holographic map. "The swarm's remnants are scattered across the sector. We need to hunt them down before they regroup. That means we need your military's cooperation." Vextel nodded. "I'll have my people prepare." "Wait," Vance said. "There's something else you need to know." Vextel's mandibles clicked with tension. "What is it?" Vance paused. "We have a weapon that can destroy the swarm's hive mind permanently, but it's not like the one we used before. This one is different." "Different how?" Vextel asked. Vance hesitated. "It's not a weapon we can aim. It's a weapon that targets the swarm's neural network. It will disrupt their communication and coordination, but it will also disrupt everything else in the area." Vextel stared at the commander. "What do you mean?" Vance's expression hardened. "Using the weapon will devastate the local star system. It will render any inhabited worlds in the area uninhabitable." "Commander, that's not acceptable," Vextel said. "That would mean sacrificing millions of my people." "I know," Vance said. "We didn't want to use it. That's why we went through so much trouble to find the swarm's flagship, but we didn't destroy it completely. The swarm's hive mind is still intact." Vextel's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You don't have a choice, do you?" Vance shook his head. "We don't. The swarm's hive mind has to be eliminated. If we don't use the weapon, they'll regroup. They'll adapt. They'll be back. And next time they'll be even stronger." "So we have to sacrifice worlds," Vextel said. "We have to sacrifice our own people." Vance was silent for a long moment. "I'm sorry," he said. "I wish there was another way." Vextal stared at him. "Is this what you wanted? Is this why you came, to force us to make impossible choices?" "No," Vance said. "We came because the swarm is the enemy. We came because we have to stop them, the sacrifices. They're just the cost of victory." Vextal didn't know what to say. He had come expecting gratitude, diplomacy, a future of peaceful cooperation. Instead, he found himself facing an impossible choice. "Commander," Vextal said, "I need to think about this." "Take all the time you need," Vance said. "But make no mistake, the weapon will be used. It's the only way to end this." Vextal nodded and turned to leave. He had made his decision, and it was one he would regret for the rest of his life. Vextal stood on the bridge of the Resolute Hope, watching the holographic display. The human fleet was deploying, moving into position for the final assault. The swarm's remnants were scattered across the sector, their vessels drifting without direction. But the weapon was still there, a massive device that would end everything. "Ambassador," Lorsa approached, her voice trembling. "The humans are ready to fire. They're waiting for our authorization." Vextal nodded. He had given the order. He had authorized the sacrifice. It was the only way. "Prepare the evacuation," he ordered. "Move every ship we can to the edge of the sector." "Yes, Ambassador." Lorsa moved to the comm station, her antennae flat against her skull. Vextal watched as the human fleet began to move. They were positioning themselves around the weapon, their ships forming a protective formation. "Ambassador," Lorsa reported, "the humans are asking for confirmation. They want to know if we're ready." Vextal paused. He felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. "Confirm," he said. "Tell them to fire." Lorsa hesitated. "Ambassador, are you sure?" Vextal looked at her. "We've already made our choice. There's no going back now." Lorsa nodded and relayed the order. The human fleet fired. A beam of energy lanced out from the weapon, striking the swarm's remnants. The effect was immediate. The swarm's vessels began to disintegrate, their organic hulls breaking down as if exposed to acid. "Ambassador, the weapon is working," Lorsa said. "The swarm's remnants are being destroyed. The hive mind is collapsing." Vextal watched the display. The swarm's vessels were disappearing one by one. The hive mind was gone. "It's over," Vextal breathed. "It's finally over." But even as he spoke, he saw the damage. 3 of his worlds were gone, their surfaces rendered uninhabitable by the weapon's effect. Millions of his people were dead. "Ambassador, look," Lorsa pointed. "The human fleet is moving, they're regrouping." Vextal watched as the human ships reformed, their weapons still active, their crews still ready. They had won. They had destroyed the swarm's hive mind, but the cost had been unimaginable. "Get me Commander Vance," Vextal ordered. The commander's image appeared on the display. His expression was unchanged. "Ambassador," he said, "it's done. The swarm's hive mind is gone." Vextal nodded. "I know, I saw." "Your worlds will be restored," Vance continued. "We have technology that can terraform the damaged surfaces within a generation. Your people will survive." "That's not enough," Vextal said. "You promised us an alliance. You promised us peace. Instead, you gave us this." Vance was silent for a long moment. "I know," he said. "I'm sorry. I wish there was another way." Vextal stared at him. "Is this what you wanted? Is this why you came?" "No," Vance said. "We came because the swarm is the enemy. We came because we have to stop them, the sacrifices. They're just the cost of victory." Vextal was silent. He had nothing left to say. "Ambassador," Vance said, "I know this is hard. I know you're angry, but we can help you rebuild. We can help you recover. That's what we do. We rebuild. We survive." Vextal nodded. "I understand." The transmission ended. Vextal watched the human fleet depart, their ships moving toward the warp corridor. "Ambassador," Lorsa said, "what happens now?" Vextal looked at her. "We rebuild," he said. "We survive, that's all we can do." Lorsa nodded, but Vextal could see the question in her eyes, the question he couldn't answer. "What have we done?" Vextal found Commander Vance in the Sword of Terra's conference room. The commander was studying a holographic map of the sector, his expression unreadable. "Commander," Vextal said, "we need to talk." Vance looked up. "Ambassador, what is it?" Vextal stepped forward. "The weapon, we need to talk about the weapon." Vance was silent for a moment, then he nodded. "Go ahead." Vextal paused. "Commander, I need to know the truth. Why did you come? Why did you involve us in your war?" Vance was silent. Then he said, "Because we need allies." "Allies?" Vextal asked. "You came to make allies." "No," Vance said. "We came to prepare. The swarm is gone, but there are other threats out there, threats that are even worse." Vextal stared at him. "What do you mean?" Vance stepped closer. 300 years ago, the swarm attacked Earth. We thought it was the end of everything, but it wasn't. It was just the beginning. He activated the holographic display. Images appeared, records of other species, other threats. "The swarm wasn't the only enemy out there," Vance said. "There are others. Species that are even more dangerous, species that have been watching us, waiting." Vextal's mandibles clicked with alarm. "Commander, that's not possible. We've been exploring the galaxy for centuries. We've never encountered any species that—" "Because they don't want to be encountered," Vance said. "They're hiding, they're watching, and they're waiting for the right moment to strike." Vextal was silent for a long moment. "What do they want?" Vance paused. "They want us to be afraid. They want us to be weak. They want to conquer us when we're at our most vulnerable." "Commander, I don't understand," Vextal said. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" Vance looked at him. "We want you to survive, not because we care, because we can't fight this war alone. We need allies." Vextal stared at him. He had come expecting answers. Instead, he found more questions. "Commander, I need to know the truth," Vextal said. "Is there really a threat? Or is this just a way to keep us under your control?" Vance was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You'll have to decide that for yourself." The holographic display changed. New images appeared, records of battles, of destroyed worlds, of species that had been conquered. "I'm sorry," Vance said. "I wish there was another way." Vextal stared at him. He had come expecting answers. Instead, he found himself facing an impossible choice. "Commander," Vextal said, "we need to make a decision. Do we continue to trust you, or do we go our own way?" Vance was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "That's your choice, but make no mistake, the threat is real, and if you don't prepare, you won't survive." Vextal left the conference room, his thoughts racing. He had come expecting answers. Instead, he found himself more confused than ever. Vextal stood on the observation deck of the Resolute Hope, watching the human fleet depart. The swarm was gone. The war was over, but the cost had been unimaginable. 3 of his worlds were gone. Millions of his people were dead, and the humans were leaving, their mission complete. "Ambassador," Lorsa approached, her voice hesitant. "The human fleet has entered the warp corridor. They'll be gone within the hour." Vextal nodded. "I know." Lorsa hesitated. "Ambassador, I don't understand. They saved us. They destroyed the swarm, but they also destroyed our worlds. They killed millions of our people. What are we supposed to think?" Vextal was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "We're supposed to survive. That's all we can do. That's all we've ever done." He paused. "The humans aren't saviors. They're not conquerors. They're survivors. And survival has a cost." Lorsa was silent, then she nodded. "I understand." Vextal turned to watch the human fleet disappear into the warp corridor. He thought about Commander Vance, about the war, about the sacrifices they had all made. "Ambassador," Lorsa said, "what happens now?" Vextal paused. "We rebuild," he said. We survive, that's all we can do. Lorsa nodded. And the humans? Vextal looked at her. They'll be back when they need us, when the next threat appears. Lorsa was silent. Then she said, and when that happens, what will we do? Vextal didn't answer. He watched the stars, wondering if he had made a deal with salvation or damnation. It doesn't matter, he said finally. Either way, we'll never be the same. The resolute Hope turned toward its damaged worlds, beginning the long journey home. Vextal stood at the viewport, watching the stars drift past. The humans were gone. The swarm was gone, but the scars would remain. Ambassador, Lorsa said, her voice filled with concern. Are you all right? Vextal nodded. I will be eventually. He paused. Get me the engineering team. We have work to do. Lorsa nodded and left the observation deck. Vextal stayed at the viewport, watching the stars. The humans had given them a gift, wrapped in sacrifice. Now it was up to them to decide what to do with it. The journey home would be long, but they were still alive, and that was all that mattered. The end.